today about the movie set Rust, because it's got a lot of great lessons, right, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, the sad part about this, of course, is that someone had to lose their life for some of these lessons to land.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it is very depressing in many regards that someone has lost their life, but I think, overall, this occurs quite frequently in areas in the workplace. People lose their lives because of mistakes that we make, and I think, there's just so many things to kind of look at here. Whether or not you believe Alec Baldwin holds ultimate responsibility, should have checked the gun, should not have checked the gun. I think when it comes to risk management and loss control and safety, something that you and I preach quite frequently is the fault versus responsibility.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about it, Matt. I mean,
it just, we've seen this over and over again. You see it a lot in society. There's kind of a trend towards people looking for fault, looking for blame. It's a negative thing, right, Steve?
Yes.
I mean, just they're looking to point a finger. They're not looking to take on the responsibility for something to happen. And that's the other side of the coin. We like to see the positivity, the proactivity of taking responsibility, of taking ownership, and handling that duty and obligation of actually addressing a safety issue. So, for instance, take Alec Baldwin. Let's say, and however live ammunition ended up in that gun. What do we always teach about anybody who handles guns? What do you never do?
You never pointed at anybody unless you're willing to destroy them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So the responsibility side of that is, if Alec Baldwin wanted to put himself in a position where he's going to be responsible, he's going to say, you know what? I'm not going to, maybe there isn't live ammo. I believe there isn't live ammo in this, and it's not going to hurt anyone, but I'm not going to take the responsibility that's wrong because I didn't put that ammo in there. And I know, as a rule, with guns, you never point a gun at somebody unless you're going to actually use it on them. So don't point that gun at anybody. So that's the responsibility side of it. And unfortunately, the stories are all about fault, right, Steve? The lawsuits, the who's to blame, what's the liability, and of course the criminal liability, because now we've had just recently
the civil suit went through,
Yeah, the civil suit went through, and then they also charged Baldwin, and I think it was the safety manager,
their armorer,
or the armorer, who was charged with manslaughter.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, very serious.
So when I look at this, yes, fault versus responsibility. At the top of the organization is the executive producer, director, Alec Baldwin, and he holds ultimate responsibility on this issue. Regardless of whose fault it was that this was here or there or not or this, it is his responsibility. It is his responsibility to check the gun. And I think when we look at this lesson that we are learning, the responsibility to take care of all the things that you touch and all the things that you look at. I mean, we do this in forklift training all the time as well, which is, if, let's say, Matt and I share the forklift, and we give this example a lot in our classes. Matt, for whatever reason, is operating the forklift. He gets he finds a leak in one of the hydraulic hoses. He's about to report it. He gets an emergency call from his wife. His wife says, "Oh my gosh, our child has been involved in an accident. You need to get to the hospital right now." In a frenzy, he up and leaves and doesn't report it. I get on the forklift, trusting Matt. The same scenario, trusting that the gun is handed to me. I get on the forklift. I start to operate it and I have an accident because Matt didn't tell me about the hydraulic leak. Well, the pre-trip inspection is my responsibility regardless if it's been in operation already. It's my first time on it. And even though I trust Matt, things happen. And that's why it is your responsibility to always check the things that you are working with. You know, someone hands you a tool, unless you're watching that tool and seeing that it's operating properly, you don't just take the tool and start using it. You got to check things, right? Like, how many times do you grab a drill and the chuck is not fully tightened? Okay, right. You know, like you check those things before you start. All kinds of things like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you put on your SCBA without checking that you got air? I mean, it's right. Like, check these things.
Yeah, exactly. It just like, I mean, are you going to go up at height and put on your full harness and not check it out to make sure that there aren't abrasions on there?
Right.
You jump, and then you let's say, just accidents happen. You trip and you happen to pitch over like the scaffolding or whatever, and then your lanyard snaps.
Right.
and you fall. And what how does it go? You fall 11 feet or more, 80% of people get hurt, 20% of people die, and of course those numbers get worse the higher up you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all that can be stopped if you take the responsibility of checking your fall harness gear, of making sure that it is operable, and
right.
that it's going to save you if, heaven forbid, an accident should happen. But the thing is, people, and we see this a lot, Steve, people want to, they get to work and they've got like a long laundry list of things that they got to do, and they take shortcuts with this stuff. They think, oh, it worked yesterday, it worked last week, it's going to work today. Or like you said, I've always gotten on this forklift after Steve. Or Steve has always gotten off on this forklift after Matt, and it's never been a problem.
Right.
And the assumption is that forklift is going to be that problem, and then you get out there, you don't do those tests, and you're carrying a 5,000-pound load, and all of a sudden, that mast totally breaks, and the forks slam down on the ground, and people get hurt by the debris,
right.
Or you get a tip over,
Right.
I mean,
yeah, it's not a good thing.
Yeah,
it's not a good thing. I think we do this a lot with the dining, right? Like, how many times do you go out to eat, you get your silverware, you always do a visual check of your silverware. Is it dirty? Is it clean? Right?
Yes.
Yes. But we don't do it with everything else because we don't feel that it personally affects us. We're not as tuned into the effects of the issue upon our bodies, right?
Yes.
And so, again, what are these lessons that we learned from the Rust movie set? Well, the other one, Matt, which I think is fascinating, is that people were quitting left and right saying things were unsafe. And,
yeah.
And, I think when you look at that piece, how many times do employees do this? This isn't safe. This isn't safe. Hey, you know what? I'm not happy with that. It doesn't look right. Something's not right. And upper management, again, Alec Baldwin, dismissing that, whatever level. I mean, I think, I am. Let's do the alleged dismissal. I don't know specifically, but allegedly these things are being said and done. And I don't want to throw Alec under the bus. I don't know the man. Who knows? But ultimately, he takes full responsibility, or should take full responsibility for his movie, his set, and his work site. And again, this is the example. How many times do these things get dismissed out of hand? We see it at some of our clients from time to time, where they brought us in to look at issues. We talk about them, and they get dismissed. the employees, we keep coming back to evaluate the same employees, nothing gets done, and you're like, I wonder why that keeps getting dismissed. And at some level it's out of our span of control, so to speak. I mean, we can't purchase the equipment, we can't do certain things because we are consultants simply. But how many times do you see that? And you just go like, why is nobody listening? Why do we have safety committees? Why do we have the ability to communicate these issues if no one's going to actually take them seriously? And you see this reports of people leaving that movie set, and then you wonder, okay, what is the lesson there? Well, the lesson is the reputational risk. That if you run a terrible site, if it's unsafe, people are going to leave. And I think after COVID, that has become more so. People just are not willing to tolerate unsafe workplaces.
Right. Right. And I got to tell you, Steve, I think that that's a positive development, like overall. I think a lot of times people in the past would sit there and take it. Like they wouldn't say, I'll risk it because I need that paycheck. I need that, Now they're seeing that there are more options out there. Like a lot of people were pushed out of their comfort space for their jobs in the pandemic, and we're seeing that with like the resignations, the great resignation as they called it.
Sure.
People testing new boundaries for what they felt they could do and work and everything like that. People aren't as beholden to their employers anymore. And while as an employer, that's not always a great thing, I think as an employee, it's a wonderful thing, because that means when you don't run a safe ship, people are going to leave now. They're not going to sit and take it. And you're either going to adjust your practices or you're not going to succeed in business.
Right. Yeah, well, and again, like that's something that we talk about, is the personal responsibility to make a decision that is good for you in your life and your career and your family. When we talk about hearing protection, for example, we talk about the purpose of the annual audiogram. And the purpose is to give you enough time to recognize that you're experiencing hearing loss before you go to full loss of hearing, and that at some point you either are wearing the protection incorrectly, not wearing the right level of protection, and you have a choice to make. Do I continue in this career, or do I do something different? If the employer is not going to make the changes necessary or won't allow you to reduce the amount of time that you're in those spaces, it's a personal choice. You don't have to work there. And I think that's kind of the refreshing part of this movie set and people leaving an unsafe work environment, is that many times, beyond just staying there, they see themselves as victims and that there are no other choices. And in this case, we're seeing that, well, the choice is yours. And I had this discussion with some family members before, and even some of our groups that we belong to, Matt, like the issue of freedom comes up, and people say, we're not free in the United States. And I disagree 100%. And I say, we have the ultimate freedom here. And you just may not like the consequences. You don't have to work anywhere. You don't have to work. You don't have to work in an unsafe zone. You don't have to follow society rules. You don't have to not steal. Like, you have the freedom to do whatever you want, but you will suffer the consequences of those actions. So if you want to run an unsafe work environment, well, then you may not be in business long, And again, there's a balance there, but if you're not communicating and you're dismissing things out of hand, well, then you suffer those consequences. And people do have choices. And sometimes the choice between earning, $100,000 on this movie set as a grip or as a lighting specialist or whatever is not worth the end of your life,
Yes, exactly. It just, that's what I was saying, that just people felt, like you said, maybe they accounted themselves as victims. They gave up that control. And we talk a lot about this, about what's in your control, what's not in your control. You have control about whether or not you're going to continue to work at that site.
Yes.
So I like that people now are recognizing that they have that control, whereas before they felt that they were victims. And they're taking responsibility by removing themselves from a dangerous situation.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good thing. What other lessons are out there, Matt, on this movie set of Rust? I think the other one is negligent retention. Retention. So here I heard through the news reports that one of the people, the husband of the deceased, has now become a key player on this movie set and will be taking charge of it. And it's like, why would you bring somebody in that has that close of a tie to these things, right?
Yeah.
The whole case is a little messy. I think there's other things, the foul play issues should be looked at. But when you start to continue with this, why should whether or not Mr. Baldwin is responsible, like in the legal sense of killing this person, why should you continue to keep this person on?
Yeah. And
why should you keep the armor on? Why should you keep any of those individuals that were involved with that gun, that ammunition on? That is just simply negligent retention of people that have made serious issues and occur. And I think this comes down to the fact that the other lesson on this side of the coin is the issue of enforcement of the safety policies, right? Like, if you're going to allow those individuals to continue to be on set, be around set, keep those jobs, you're just taking on, again, the act of allowing people to violate the rules without consequences. And those are very serious. I mean, an armorer position is an extremely serious position. And how any live round got on that set to begin with is an issue of access control, security, very many things. I mean, this is a case study in safety and risk management that we can really put into a college course, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah. And this is a Western, Steve.
Yeah.
There are guns all over this set.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, there are guns that aren't even ever intended to be used in the script, but they're on the persons of the people that, as part of their characters.
Yeah.
That in and of itself presents a risk.
Yes.
What kind of controls do you have around that to protect against the possibility that, again, live ammo might have gotten into those guns? I mean, for instance, again, do they have bathrooms that are set up for stowing their guns in a protective sleeve? You know, I mean, are they likely to have that on a movie set like that? They should.
I doubt it.
I doubt it.
I doubt it. Well, and it just begs the question, Matt. Like, you take a movie like John Wick, where there's so many guns, it's not even funny. How many? The Expendables, Predator. Every Western ever made. Like, this is a case where safety and security, access control, armament, all of it is not done very well.
Yes.
And you have prime examples of things that are done much better, which is another lesson here. Like, if you are taking on a role or responsibility the first time, then there are problem-solving techniques that you can put into place. And one of them is to go out to people in your industry and say, what do you guys do? How do you handle this? What's the best way to handle that? Right?
Right.
We see this. I mean, I don't know who this armorer is, but when you look at this, you just have to say, like, what was the history on this person? How did this happen? And and when I go back to one of our PD clients, and ransomware attacks and things like this, and you go, well, you put in a security professional that had no experience. Did you put in an armorer with little experience on this case because you're trying to save $1, or they're a friend of yours, or whatever the case was? But there's just so many lessons here, and I encourage risk managers and safety professionals, really, this is a great case study in safety and risk and fault versus responsibility. And I think it's something that we should all take a further dive into. We could go on and on, Matt. I just want to get this out there and, give our fellow risk managers a little bit to think about and talk about. If you are so interested, we have the Dollar Training Club in Udemy, where you can take some of our courses. Don't forget to check out our blog site, and follow us here on LinkedIn and YouTube. We have the chat available. This is kind of our first live stream on the LinkedIn, so I wasn't expecting a lot of people to be on the chat. Maybe you'll catch this a little later, but we produce these quite frequently. Check out the Risk Control Show, and we'll see you next time.